Welcome to week 2 of MBA 617 decision modeling with spreadsheets. And the screen you're looking at is the course drive under reading for week 2. I'm going to open up the reading for this week. Oh, my goodness, look at that. It gives you all of the base HTML. Of course, you cannot open it up in Google. They do not allow that anymore. For a few years now. And instead, we must open it up into Google Chrome. Now, if this doesn't work for you, it doesn't seem to be working for me very well. There we go. You can download it directly into your laptop and then open it up from your laptop as opposed to through the Google Drive connection to the Chrome app. Okay, that's the world we live in. I start this out with a little bit of a diatribe about proliferation of software. The couple of takeaways from this for me are, after all of the stuff, and this is in first person and the rest of the courses in our class, the royal we, for me, I've had to use lots of different tools. If I'm fixing something mechanical, it's the same set of tools all the time. Wrenches and screwdrivers and Allen wrenches, wing nuts, lag bolts are all the same. Software has been quite a bit different. We've been going through all of the things from the Stone Age forward in about 30, 40 years. Quite amazing. Give it 50, 60 back to 61, 70, and a little bit further than that. In the early 1800s, of course, key cards were used on hydropower looms to replicate patterns. Okay, we've been digitalized for quite a long time. The sprockets on gears in adding machines, very, very digital. Nothing analog about that. So what you get is lots of this. And the point I'm kind of coming at is softwares. You're going to see things change every 10 to 12 years, but I have not seen that much of a change. Say the change between Fortran and APL and C++ and now R, SAS, and other very fine products. Julia, one of my new favorites. I have to learn yet another syntax and another grammar, but the basic concepts are all the same. Spreadsheets are a bit different. Spreadsheets have a very different thinking pattern inside of them. They're more like how you manipulate memory in a processor chip. That's what I keep finding out in my life. I don't put that here. I put that a little bit later in a discussion with a for loop. It's important to understand what's under the hood. Maybe not down to the metallurgy of the engine, although sometimes that's kind of useful when you think about why you should change oil in a car. But this is going to change, but spreadsheets have not. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Use what works, but always remember it's the mind that runs everything. So what's new? It's last week. Simon Torsier is not able to make payroll, is having to borrow, is having all sorts of problems. Okay. Adam Torsier is in a high cost, lower demand environment all of a sudden. We're kind of like that. At the time of the making of this video, we're still in a COVID pandemic. It's changed everything. There are new normals all over the place. New business plans, basically, with new cost structures, reaching consumers with products and services with different preferences embedded in them. Costs are changing. That's the first thing you're going to see. Here's the old costs. Here are the new costs. They're much more volatile. They're higher and lower than the number of pies. This is because capital and labor are changing rapidly. Machines break down and they can't be fixed quickly enough. There's nobody to fix them. They can't get there. Labor doesn't show up because they're sick. Healthcare costs are going up. Employees get sick and they slip and fall. Okay, things are happening. One of the major innovations of this is to introduce how uncertainty can be broadcast from this data into a model. And that broadcast is still using the same linear estimation technique that is ordinary least squares. As you can see, what's popping up in the bottom here is a different picture as well. We're going to produce an upper and a lower bound against actual costs. And typically we do that against predicted costs, but I think this one's a little bit more dramatic. And the interval that we develop and quantify to quantify the uncertainty is a 95% probability interval. Actually, one of the more useful ones has always been the 89%. And I'll go into that when we hit simulation. On the vertical axis is the probability we see a cost level. On the horizontal level axis are low, medium, and high costs spread across. The L stands for a lower bound. The U stands for an upper bound. In the middle, if the distribution of plausibility, the probability of cost is symmetric and doesn't have very thick tails, business as usual. This is typically the Gaussian normal, or what I like to call it, the geocentric firm, the Bill Foot-centric firm curve here. The centricity of it is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Corporate policy sets error rates. In this case, it's 5%. And on a symmetric curve like this, that means there's 2.5 in the upper, 2.5 in the lower, adding up to 5% possible error allowed. And that's probably across the organization typically. There is zero tolerance for a gift of $25, more than $25 in nearly all organizations. But just as simple as that. You don't take a government employee out to lunch and pay for the lunch. You barely take the employee out for lunch at all because it's an intolerable risk to the possibility of getting a contract with the government. That's how draconian, Draco, the famous draconian, the rule can be. Okay, so we're building. What is the lower bound on cost? What's the upper bound on cost? And people normally understand this as, I call it a probability interval, because I'm a Bayesian at heart. We'll call this a confidence interval. So it is whatever the mean, whatever the center is, minus the number of standard deviations times the standard deviation. Now the standard deviation comes directly from line est. Check that out. Okay, check that out. Or mu plus how many standard deviations from this. And we can calculate the number of standard deviations using a normal curve. Okay. This is not the only reason at all. But one of the reasons we did not detect a major 2008 decline, drop, crash in value in the markets. We used the normal curve. The events weren't the events were huge. They're rare, but the normal curve couldn't pick them up, couldn't detect them because the thinness of the tail did not allow a proper detection. We have to use things called power curves, the left pocket distributions as opposed to right pocket distributions, as we used to say it. And we've been saying this for years, many years, but nobody seems to be listening still. By the way, when profits are booming and coming in through the front door, risk management tends to try to get out of the fire that's burning through the back window. Okay, and it's usually the very small back window in a bathroom. Okay, this is typical human behavior. We use a z-score, which centers a cost observation around a proposed mean and scale this deviation, how far away you are from the mean, per unit, per standard deviation. That's one of the reasons why it's called standard. It's a per unit measure. And this is also kind of a risk measure too. How far away are you in standard deviations? And we create this interesting chart where the blue are the actual and the upper bound is blue. I think I should have made that red. And and you can change that easily by simply clicking on it and changing the format of that variable red. I like dash lines here. Um, I just want to keep this clear. I didn't put any lines in between this. That's a visualization, an aesthetic approach. But look, even the upper and lower bounds are therefore variable. There's a lot of variability. Volatility is itself variable, it would seem from this, but we actually need to put a little bit more modeling into that idea. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that demand takes a big step back. Okay, it isn't $12 anymore a pie that people are willing to pay and not pay for it anymore. That would have been over here. And what we could do with this curve is show the old curve as well and show that it shifted to the left. That's not a good thing. That means less demand at any price. Okay, pick a price up here, pick a price on the vertical axis, pick a price, and you have less demand today than you did yesterday. This is the problem that she's facing. Okay. And we're quantifying that problem like we did before. Here's the algebraic equation. Instead of 48,000 in the intercept, it's 45. Instead of minus 4,000, we have minus steeper negative slope. Okay, so that's quantitatively what's happening. It's producing this. This is processing costs. We need to do a root cause analysis to get behind this. Better yet, a failure modes and effects analysis to see where the problems can be fixed. Failure points, single points of failure especially. A new prophet dawns. Oh, when she looks and everybody's happy, and she's not that happy, by the way. Yeah, the weekly profit seems to be okay. Okay, that's probably, if that's all you're looking at, fine, but you're still going in the hole. Why? Well, they need to look at this across time. That's part of the answer. And we will be doing that. Of course, sensitivity analysis, just like last week. And we're done with the big changes on profit relative. Now, profit's dropping. Okay, profit is definitely dropping. If you put these same parameters in, you will see a lower profit. You'll see a different optimal price too. I mean, costs are going up. Preferences for it are coming down. The price is dropping. When it gets too low, that's a disinflation issue. Classic disinflation. That's like saying uninflation. It's not deflation. It's disinflation. We want prices to keep going up a little bit to keep track with costs. And technology, of course, makes that more efficient so you can offer a lower price and still get more volume. Not happening here. So we create an algebra. Yes, algebra. Golden age of Islamic science and mathematics gives us this. It's a good read. Check it out. And now we have this. These are equations. They are trying to depict what's going on. And this is one other tool we can use alongside of the influence diagram. Matter of fact, a terrific exercise is to line up these equations with the influence diagram. I will post in the readings the influence diagram paper itself. And you'll see it's a little bit more complicated than boxes and arrows. because we're trying to think through a problem and use a tool to do it. That's the mind tool. And then we implement it in whatever technology environment we happen to be blessed with. I am not inventing these environments, that's for sure. No, maybe modifying them. But you can see this price drives everything. Price grows from really date one. That's what the I minus one gets you. Try to understand what that one is. That's very interesting. And then it gets whatever today's price is, it grows. Well, the first price that we set is in year one, not year zero. Okay, that's an important key here. Demand in year one is equal to the intercept plus slope times price. And for an annual model, we have to multiply that by 52 weeks. Big, interesting issue. And revenue is easy, price times demand. Okay, done. Process cost has this monster of an equation. Remember, we measured process cost in thousands of pies on a weekly basis. There's your answer. So we have to take all of that demand, which is now on a 52-week basis, divide it by 52 weeks and 1,000 to get the comparable numbers into the equation, and then flip them back out, multiply it all again by 52,000, because we have this squared thing in there. That's the reason. Okay, so that algebraically and dimensionally is now correct. But check that out for yourself. Write it out. Make sure you get the idea there. And that's an important skill in quantitative analysis, to be able to understand the dimensions. If you multiplied everything by 1,052 in the cost estimates, which will give you humongous numbers, you wouldn't need all of this. But the humongously large numbers might not be very tractable in some computing environments. I wouldn't test it out in Excel, for example. So we dimensionalize things to make them a little bit easier for, look, it's easier to multiply 12.523 times anything than 12,523. That's the idea here. Okay, filling cost, that grows from year to year to year. So does fixed costs, dough costs. Costs are all of these costs: process, dough, filling, fixed. Pretty straightforward. Profit is revenue minus cost. And then I have this thing here called PV equals profit plus the discounted profit from the next period. That's the key finance relationship. That's finance. Finance 101 maybe, but it is the one thing that drives our model. Well, check that out. I have some words here, and again, a little bit about how to interpret some of these numbers and how to see them. $9 grows into $9.18. One of the things that is really hard for companies to do is the gross to net price structure, with all the discounts, volume discounts, price discounts, markups, markdowns, as you eventually get to a net price. And this is a hard thing to program in planning models, a hard thing to track in enterprise models of data as well. It's almost a grand challenge. The other one that's a really tough one is cost of goods sold. Very difficult to track across multiple SKUs, like the millions of SKUs, shopkeeper units, say at SC Johnson Consumer Products or P&G or others, or Nestle Global. Very, very tough thing. Here's a little bit more about fillings and all of that. And so weiter, as we say in Leipzig, talking with too many people in Germany these days. I then go through a short discussion on present value. You can read this in Winston as well. He has a chapter on net present value that I cite, and it's a good chapter. It's a very good chapter. It lays out the foundation, much like this. But we're starting. I'm just this is a toy model. We have cash flows. One is negative and two are positive. This one isn't going to work. I can see that now. And when we add this, I mean, if there was no discount, no time value of money, that's $25 million versus 20. That's a $5 million gain. But as we say in the business, there's a haircut. Right, here's my hair. It's been cut. It'll be cut by a discount. We'll see how that works. So good practice here is to take each plank, look at the 20 by itself and notice that it's in the negative direction, and then do the 10 and then do the 15, all separately. That's actually how we do it when we build financial contracts, procurement contracts. Oh gosh, tolling contracts. Okay, that's how that works. But the present value of anything happening today is just whatever that number is today. In this case, it's minus 20. But the actual calculation is 20 divided by 1 plus a required rate of return, which in this case is 10%. And that's raised to the 0 power. And that is consistent with the 20 number. Put a minus sign in front of it, and we got it right. So we'll have a little tally of present value on the left here. And then we go to the next plank, which is the plus 10. Looks like I have a tremor. No, I probably do. Okay, and I've got this going up, but its haircut is a little less than $1, going from time 1 to time 2 at 10%. And sometimes we do this in present value formulas. We'll say, or functions, we'll say going from 0 to 1. Here's the number at 1, and we discount it 1 period, and it's $9.09. No, notice bene, note well. We can take 909, earn 10% on it, well, factor it out, and we get 10 back. Okay, it can go both directions, and thus present value and future value are inverses of one another. Functionally, they are inverses of one another. Growth in value, growth is what we're talking about. That's the required return. That's the required growth rate. How much do you have to post bail in today in order to get 10 out in the future in one period at 10%? We do the same thing, but twice for the second period. The first period that we look at is the last period. We start from the end. 15 works back to $13.64. Okay, that's just one period. The 13 on a reinvestment rate hypothesis, which is a big hypothesis, we assume, and that's a big assumption, that, okay, going from 2 back to 1, 15, 13, 64. Oh, we say wonderful. But then we have to take 1634 and let it travel back to 0, because today is the day that we're interested in. That at 10% is 1240. So our final number is 1240. And we can do a little bit of algebra, very little bit of algebra, just to understand this. 15 has been discounted by this reverse compounding, actually. You could put a 1 over 1.1, the whole thing could be squared. And we can just factor that out and say it's 15 divided by this. Oh, that's just 1364 divided. Oh, okay. It's all consistent with one another. It's algebra. Better be consistent. And here too, we can take the 1240, just compound it twice, okay? first time it becomes 1364. The second time it becomes 15. It's all consistent with one another. That's what we're doing in this model. That's different, big time. And I'm going to make a play on this, but I'm not going to try to explain it today too much. Present value at time I is equal to whatever cash flow you're entitled to receive at that date, like a dividend, plus the present value at time I plus 1 discounted by the rate of return between I and I plus 1. Substitute 0 in for I, we get PV0 equals CF0, whatever cash flows are there, plus PV1 divided by 1 plus 0 to 1 to the first power. This is the fundamental valuation formula of all finance. All finance. All finance runs this way, present and future value. Oh, the other couple of things you got to know about finance is supply equals demand. People make transactions and they agree on something. One other thing, cash flows can be kind of kinked. They don't have nice smooth geometries. They can go out here and then pop up all of a sudden. They can get triggered. That's most cash flows. We just live in a non-triggered situation most of the time, thank goodness. But when we're out the ends of those cost distributions, things trigger. Procurement contract things, clauses start to trigger. And how do we put that into the analysis? Because that's all part of our life. If I default on my rent, a clause in my lease contract triggers. Termination clause. That costs money, and I have to exercise it. I can't get out of the tail of my distribution of being able to pay for my rent. Then I have to discharge it. Means hand the keys to the apartment back to the landlord. All of that's inside of this, and that's future value. PVI plus 1, future value. A model emerges in the mist. We'll have a lot to say about this. So let's let this be the end of part 1. Part 2 is going to get into the gorilla in the mist. A little bit more detailed here for another round. And more importantly, sensitivity and some other things that we should really look at in this model, as you can see. Let's devote a separate session to that, along with a little traverse through the references and the one reference and the many endnotes. All right, as always, thank you very much for your kind attention, and stay tuned for part 2 of the week 2 walkthrough of the reading. Thanks.